Welcome to the presentation on assistive technology and/or environmental interventions. I want to take the next few minutes and walk you through this topic. First of all, assistive technology is any piece of equipment that helps an individual maintain or improve their ability to do the day-to-day activities as independently as possible. There are many examples of possible assistive devices. Here are a few examples. There can be walking aids, eating utensils, or communication systems. These are the devices that are operated by the individual whenever possible. An environmental intervention is any piece of equipment or changes to a structure that increases an individual's ability to be more independent. As these are not individual specific necessarily, like a wheelchair or communication device, they are generally the responsibility of the service provider. The examples that fall under environmental interventions could be equipment or interior and exterior modifications. Regardless of whether you are looking at an assistive technology or an environmental intervention, which I might also call AT or EI, they can also fall into one of three categories. The first category is aids to daily living, and is something that increases the individual's independence. So examples of these can include canes, wheelchairs, ramps, or grab bars. When an AT or EI falls under this category, consent and general guidelines for use, including maintenance and repair information, must be in place. The second category is health and safety. This looks at any assistive technology or environmental intervention that limits an individual's independence but might need to be in place to ensure the health or safety of an individual. For example, while a wheelchair might fall under aids to daily living, a lap belt, when used to prevent an individual from getting out of his or her wheelchair and falling because he or she can't stand up on their own, that falls under the health and safety category. In terms of documentation, any AT or EI for health and safety needs to have guidelines and consent in place. Guidelines need to include maintenance schedules and repair information. The third category is assistive technology or environmental interventions that limits an individual's independence because it is in place to address a behavior of concern. Thus, the category is called behavior of concern. For example, a harness might be necessary to be worn in a vehicle to address the behavior of hitting or distracting a driver. When trying to determine the difference between health and safety or behavior of concern as a category, ask yourself what is the intent of the behavior or the action you are addressing. If it is indeed a behavior, it falls under behavior of concern. Issues like posture or falling are not behaviors, and they are health and safety concerns, and fall under that category. When an AT or EI falls under the behavior of concern category, all documentation must meet the requirements outlined in Standard 32 around planned restrictive procedures, or in some cases, Standard 31 around planned positive procedures. Prior to using an AT or EI, there needs to be consultation with a qualified professional, such as an occupational therapist or physiotherapist. Continuous follow-up or review by a qualified professional is not necessary unless the qualified professional requests it or the needs of the individuals change. Guidelines for the use of the device is important. These may be provided by the qualified professional or they can be written by the staff. The guidelines are important as they help the staff to be consistent. They also should have maintenance and repair schedules and responsibilities. It also provides information for staff to know what to do and how to best support the individual to be as independent as possible with the device. In addition, there must be consent in place for all AT or EI. I'm going to take the next few minutes to run through a few examples to hopefully provide more clarity to the different categories. The first example looks at an individual using a wheelchair. The wheelchair is considered an aids to daily living. If there is a lap belt and the individual cannot remove it on its own, that is also considered aids to daily living. If the wheelchair has a lap belt that is preventing the individual from standing up and potentially falling, this is considered under the health and safety category. If the individual can undo the lap belt and an adaptation is added to the lap belt so the individual cannot open it, and there is potential for falling if he tries to get out of the chair, this would also fall under the health and safety category. If there is an identified behavior of concern, such as hitting or distracting a driver, a 5-point harness would be used, and that would fall under the behavior of concerns category. In this example, the use of arm restraints may fall under either the health and safety or the behavior of concern category. The reason for the restraint is what is important. If the reason for the restraint is to stop the individual from knocking food away when the staff is feeding them due to uncontrolled movement, this falls under the health and safety category. If the arm restraints are used to prevent injury due to self-abuse, then it is for a behavior of concern and would fall under that category. If you are unsure, follow the guidelines of the behavior of concern category. In this example, having an alarm on the door would fall under the health and safety category when the alarm goes off when the door is opening and the individual is going into the backyard. In this example, this is a monitoring process as staff need to ensure things like the gate is closed or the individual is wearing a jacket and it's cold outside. However, there is no restrictive or prevention of letting the individual leave the building. It is just a notification. If, in a different example, the alarm on the door alerts staff that an individual is leaving and staff redirect the individual as there is a behavior of potential running away, this is an identified behavior of concern and that would fall under this category. Requirements may fall either under Standard 31 for a positive plan or Standard 32 for a restrictive plan. When trying to determine if something like this falls under health and safety or behavior concern in terms of a category, ask yourself what the intent of the individual's actions is. It is different if he is a wanderer versus a runner. If there is an alarm and lock on the door to keep an individual from running away, this is for an identified behavior of concern and therefore must meet Standard 32 for a restrictive plan. There also needs to be guidelines and consent in place for all the other individuals that may be affected by this EI, even though it is not directly in place for them. Regardless if the video camera is being used for staff training, for individual or staff safety, or for any other reason, Standard 32 must be met for the individual that is requiring the camera because it is an identified behavior of concern. All other individuals living in the home, for example, regardless of whether it is in place directly for them, must have given consent to having the camera in place and must understand the reason for it. Staff must also have signed consent and understand the reason for the camera. In addition, service providers need to have policy and procedures in place that speak to the use of the video cameras in common areas. Make sure that policy states the intent for the cameras and that the procedures address monitoring the use of cameras, the reviewing the footage and continual need for using the cameras, including who will be doing the reviews. These procedures also need to describe the storage and destruction of the digital images and include locations and timelines. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. I hope you have gotten some good information about assistive technology and environmental interventions and how to apply it to your organization. If you have further questions, please do not hesitate to contact your accreditation coordinator. Thank you and good luck as you prepare for CET.